What's going on? Welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Today it is Halloween. Tomorrow it will not be when you hear this episode, but today as we're recording 4:30 right before Monday Night Football, it is Halloween. So we hope you enjoyed your spooky weekend, all the scary and fun things you dressed up as. Just Cameron and I hanging out on the podcast today. I'm at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, CamLaw317 for Cameron. You can follow our socials as well. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on TikTok and YouTube, where you should be subscribed and turning on your notifications because we're releasing content every single day. And the other place we're releasing content every single day. Join our Chalkboard, community full of league winners. Down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to, waiver advice, trade advice, start sit advice, everything of the sorts. We've got it there. Go join our Chalkboard. We'd love to have you join us over there. We've got a full episode as always today. We're going to recap all of week 8 action. But before we get into any of that, we have to dive through some news and notes from the weekend brought to you by our friends over at Sleeper, the #1 fantasy football platform in the world. It's where Cameron dominates Tyler and I in literally all of our fantasy football leagues because people want to just trade him chump change for really good players. Anyways, I'm tired of losing to Cameron because it's just not fun anymore. You can join over 4 million people over on Sleeper using the link down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. You have anything you want to add on to that? Like, I feel like I just threw that in there. But, I mean, it's true. Like, there's nothing false about what I just said.
If I wasn't so selfish, I would have had Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey this week. But I was a little selfish, so I just have Christian McCaffrey. I didn't want to give up the third as well as just the first. So
I still can't. We could break down that league for hours. And I'm not going to be happy about it. 177 put up in that league this week, and I still lost.
You did beat me this week.
Yeah, I beat you, but I lost my matchup. I don't care. I lost my matchup.
Yeah, that's tough.
Cooper Kupp. Hey, I played against him this week. He did exit yesterday's game, though, with an ankle injury. He's expected to be day-to-day.
On the last play of the game.
I know. That's what's brutal. They don't even have their bye week. They had their bye week last week. It's one of those where I'm like, oh man, if they had a bye week coming up, that'd be great. You could at least predict like, all right, let's give them 2 weeks of rest to heal everything up. But this is truly going to be a day-to-day. This is something you're going to have to monitor throughout the week. It's Cooper Kupp. He's probably going to be out there. But at the same time, something you're going to have to monitor going forward. Speaking of another stud who left with an ankle injury, Jonathan Taylor. He left the game against the Commanders. Commanders on yesterday. Goodness, wow, brain fog. He left the game against the Commanders yesterday with an ankle injury. He did return, but he is also questionable for week 9. Seems like to be just an ankle sprain there. I'm not worried, but man, Jonathan Taylor he's been disappointing this year.
Yeah, it's tough because he was averaging just under 5 yards per carry in this game. So it wasn't like he was terrible, but they're not scoring touchdowns.
No.
And he's not getting any receiving work. So he's just got nothing to inflate those numbers. And if he keeps getting injured, he's not going to see the 20 plus touches he needs a week to be super, like that what we saw from him last year.
Right. And when Sam Ehlinger is your quarterback, it's not like any team is going to be scared of your passing attack.
No, not
teams
at all.
are not going to be as scared of that. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough stretch here for Jonathan Taylor. Might be worth trying to go out and throw a bid on him this week if you can.
Definitely.
Just to have a guy on your team like Leonard. If you can package Leonard Fournette and like another, like Leonard Fournette and DJ Moore, I don't think that's going to get you Jonathan Taylor, but like those are the kind of players I'm looking to trade this week to acquire better talent. Mark Andrews should be okay after a shoulder injury on Thursday night. That's good news there. We kind of expected that. That was the report after the game. However, teammate Rashad Bateman, he's expected to miss a few weeks with a foot injury. This is not good because he came in hobbled on Thursday night. Literally played half of the first quarter, got stepped on, and all of a sudden he's going to miss a few weeks again.
This dude just can't stay healthy. I mean, he
No.
missed the first part of last year. He's missed parts this year. Now he's going to miss even more. It's just like they want to see what he can do as the wide receiver one, but we just haven't seen him on the field long enough to actually see what he can do. You
Right.
know, and it's just getting frustrating at this point. I bet he's frustrated himself.
Right. Because it should be his year to shine as the wide receiver one. And now going into the offseason, what do you think the Ravens' number one priority is going to be? Probably wide receivers for Lamar.
It's got to be.
Adam Thielen also left yesterday's game with a knee contusion. He is questionable for week 9. Again, this was late in the game. This was like about 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. We'll see how he is week to week. Solid day all around, though. I believe 8 targets, 6 receptions, 67 yards. Should have had a touchdown. In my opinion, it was KJ Osborne's touchdown to seal the game. It was an excellent play call, but when I heard Adam Thielen across the middle, I was in the car. When I heard Adam Thielen across the middle, I was ready to celebrate. But no, KJ Osborne. That's all right. Adam Thielen, monitor him throughout the week. And something to keep an eye on, the NFL trade deadline is today. When you, the listener, are listening to this podcast, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Pay attention to any moves that could be made. A couple of names being tossed around out there. I've heard that could impact fantasy teams. I've heard of Kareem Hunt. I've heard of who's the other running back? I know there's Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Cam Akers. That's the other name I was thinking of. Any free agent signings as well. There been any wide receiver rumor? Elijah Moore,
Chase Claypool.
Yes. I think those are the two big ones that I wanted to touch on for sure. But pay attention to those names where those players may land. At this point, I'm guessing Elijah Moore is probably on your waiver wire. But at any rate, pay attention to those names. See if they move teams tomorrow or before this podcast is out. For all we know, it could be a trade done tonight or early tomorrow morning before we get this podcast out. But
for sure.
Those are our news and notes of the week brought to you by our friends over at Sleeper, number one fantasy football platform in the world. You can join over 4 million people of the fantasy football community over on Sleeper by using the link down in the description of the YouTube video audio podcast you are listening to. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today. Week 7 boom and bust players. As always, we are going to start with our running back booms of the week. And this made my heart very full because the number one running back on the week, Alvin Kamara, this was a quintessential Alvin Kamara stat line.
Yes.
18 rushing attempts for 62 yards. Not super efficient. Did score a touchdown on the ground. But this is where he really thrives. 10 targets, 9 receptions, 96 yards, 2 touchdowns. Good for 3 total touchdowns on the day and 42.8 fantasy points. Look, this Raiders defense, if you got a running back against them, I suggest you start them most weeks.
100%.
He was insanely good. Anything you took away from his performance? I know it was his first big week. Started off the year slow, couple of 7-point duds, got into the teens, scored 20s. Now he's up to 40. What do you think for Kamara going forward?
This is kind of what we've been saying the last couple of weeks. You know, he's been in the teens without scoring a touchdown. It's kind of like, well,
right.
I mean, he's scoring 18 to 20 points with no touchdowns. Well, what do you think happens when he has a 2-3 touchdown game? Because you know it's coming. They give him the ball enough that he's going to find the end zone at some point. And like this week too, Taysom Hill still had 10 carries for 61 yards.
Yes.
So Hill was still involved, and Kamara put up 42 points. So I'd be pretty excited if you have Kamara on your team.
Yeah, it's when the touchdowns don't fall Taysom Hill's way, right?
Yes.
Like, because that was the big thing. Who was it against Seattle? When Taysom Hill took all of the rushing touchdowns and Kamara still had a good day, 23 fantasy points. But when Taysom Hill takes all your touchdowns, makes it a little bit difficult to be productive. So number 2 running back on the week, though, man, it feels really good to see 3 stud running backs that you draft to be stud running backs right at the top of the list. Yes. Christian McCaffrey. For those of you who were worried he wouldn't be good in San Francisco,
I think he's all right.
I don't know. I think he'll be fine. 18 rushing attempts for 92 yards, over 5 yards a tote. Touchdown on the day as well. 8 receptions on 9 targets for 55 yards and another tutty. 40 fantasy points on the week. And the man threw a touchdown. What can Christian McCaffrey do?
The trifecta.
I was surprised to see how many people in our comments were saying, I'm not sure how I feel about starting Christian McCaffrey this week. and not starting Christian McCaffrey, but more of like these guys who had really meaty matchups, the Raheem Mosterts, the Ken Walkers, right? Who had these really juicy matchups, and it's McCaffrey against the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
This has to ease all your concerns about him being on the 49ers now, does it not?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, maybe he loses 4 receptions for 20 yards when Debo comes back, but the 49ers always give the running back the ball, and they're gonna involve him in the passing game when he can put up these kind of numbers. Like, okay, let's say Heben loses 50% from this game, he still put up 20 points. Like, it's
Right.
like the floor is insane right now with McCaffrey, and especially with what Shanahan just showed us he could do with them. So I'd be really excited about McCaffrey as well. But like,
Yeah.
but like we've been saying all year, though, this is why you start your studs.
Yes. This is why you don't even question starting Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, any of those guys. You don't question Dalvin Cook, right? Really nice day on the ground.
Yeah.
You don't question starting those guys. You plug them into your lineup and you forget it. They are set it and forget it players. And Christian McCaffrey reminded us exactly of that against the Rams. This okay. I'm making him a feature because he needs to be made a feature because this is now 4 straight games for Derrick Henry going over 200 rushing yards against the Houston Texans. It is I like the Texans kryptonite. Like, I know they're not good at winning to begin with, but like Derrick Henry, my goodness, 32 rushing attempts, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, added a reception for 9 yards, good for 35 fantasy points. I like the man is unreal. He is unbelievable.
It is ridiculous because Malik Willis threw the ball 10 times. They didn't even try to hide it, and Henry still averaging 7 yards per carry. Like,
that's what it was, wasn't it? Oh,
yes.
goodness. 6 points. Oh, my goodness.
And so Derrick Henry, I saw this too, has tied the NFL lead for most 200-yard games in his career with 6. And his last 4, or not his last 4, but in the last 4 games against the Texans, he's got 4 of them.
4 of those are against the Texans.
223 yards and 2.3 touchdowns per game against the Texans in his last 4 games.
That's just stupid. That is just absolutely stupid. Go off, Derrick Henry. King Henry. Truly the GOAT.
It's ridiculous.
Let's move on to some honorable mentions here. Tony Pollard. Rip Zeke. This was supposed to be the Zeke week. This was supposed to be Zeke's stat line. 14 rushes, 131 yards. Goodness, that's 9.5 yards a carry. 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Add a reception for 16 yards. Like, again, you got a running back against the Chicago Bears. You better play him because this is how piss poor the run defense is. And they just traded Roquan Smith to the Ravens.
Yeah, they got nothing left on defense.
They have nothing. They have nothing on defense right now. So anybody against Chicago Bears, fire them up.
Yes.
Deonta Foreman couldn't stop scoring the football yesterday. 26 rushing attempts for 118 yards, 3 touchdowns, good for 31.8 fantasy points. Like, he is the guy. I know Chuba was out yesterday, but like against the Falcons, he had the matchup, he got the volume, he scored the points. Hashtag math. Like, that's about all you need to know about Deonta Foreman. That game was also just really crazy.
Yeah.
There was no need for Deonta Foreman to score a 3rd time, but he went ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah, 100%. They got a tough game in Cincinnati next week, so I would really temper expectations going into next week. But then they got Atlanta again, then they got Baltimore again, or not again, but then they got Baltimore, and then they got Denver, who's just shredded by ETN, then a bye, then Seattle, Pitt, Detroit. The only really bad matchup is the championship game in Tampa Bay. That would probably be a rough one. But to start off the playoffs, last game of the season was Seattle, and then you go Pitt and Detroit. It's a pretty nice way to start your playoffs.
So would you sell high on Deonta Foreman, or would you just stash him for the 2 bad matchups coming up here?
If you have a person who views him as the sole number 1 option, probably, because if they're viewing him like that, they got to be viewing him as top 20 running back, probably close to top 15, right? I mean, if you're looking at, I would sell high because Hubbard was the starter last week and they got hurt. So you don't know how it's all going to fall. Like, Foreman just had 26 carries. He volumed his way to a great day. So yeah, I would probably be looking to sell high.
That play, I mean, the thing is though, Deonta Foreman was probably a waiver ad for you, so you probably do have
Yes.
other options you can play. That's the thing you need to take
Yep.
into consideration too. But if like this
Mhm.
is your chance to build a super team, like go do that
Yes.
with Deonta Foreman. Go do that with him.
Mhm. Yep.
Travis Etienne, man, he's really good. 24
Yeah.
rushing attempts, 156 yards, and a touchdown. Added 3 receptions for only 6 yards. But yeah, this Denver defense not great against the run. Travis Etienne has arrived. He's a lock for your lineup going forward. He's borderline top 12 play from here
Yeah.
on out.
Yeah.
Really efficient, really good.
I would say he's got to be a top 15 lock moving forward every single week.
Oh yeah, top 15
Just,
lock, absolutely.
I mean, he only had 3 catches for 6 yards in this game, but he's a receiving threat out of the backfield, and he's
Right.
always been efficient. He averaged almost 8 yards a carry in college, so the dude knows how to find holes.
He knows how to find holes. He and paired with Trevor Lawrence in that offense, like the receiving work will come for ETN. I'm
Yes.
not concerned about that if he's doing this on the ground.
Mhm.
Absolutely, very very little work for JaMychal Hasty, so no need to worry about a committee there.
No.
Dalvin Cook, 20 attempts for 111 yards and a touchdown. I believe he had 80 rushing yards in the first half, 90 rushing yards in the first half even.
Mhm.
Great day on the ground against the Arizona Cardinals. Added 5 receptions as well for 25 fantasy points. He's good. You're starting him every single week. Jamal Williams, 10 attempts for 53 yards, 2 touchdowns, added 3 receptions for 23 yards, 22 fantasy points. He's like the biggest headache. He's the biggest headache of fantasy football because when he's on your
Yes.
roster, you love him. But when you have DeAndre Swift or you like observe from afar of like, maybe I should try and go buy one of these guys. I'm still terrified to invest in Jamal Williams because his value is always
Mhm.
going to be more than what I actually want to pay for him because his floor is also 4 fantasy points on a given week. But there will be
100%.
weeks like this where he outscores DeAndre Swift and they both have really good weeks.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
frustrating.
it is because he's like that touchdown dependent tight end, right?
Right.
If he finds the end zone, he's got you 12 points at the minimum. He can get you up to, like we've seen a couple times, 20 plus.
Right.
If he doesn't find the end zone, he could have just been 10 of 53 with no touchdowns and get 5 points. But he has been getting some sneaky good receiving work on top of it.
Yep.
That has added a floor. But like you're saying, am I going to treat him like a top 24 option moving forward? No. Should I probably start? Maybe. It's
Yeah.
just tough to think of him like that.
It's 100% tough to think of him like that. For now, you have a really good depth piece on your team.
Yes.
And if somebody comes and gives a good offer for him, I'm willing to part ways with him.
100%.
Ramondre Stevenson. I have a legitimate question, I think, after this. 16 attempts, 71 yards, no touchdowns on the ground, but added 7 receptions on 8 targets for 72 yards. Who would rather have rest of the season, Ramondre Stevenson or Travis Etienne?
Ooh. Wow, that is a good question.
Because I feel like everybody's hyping up Travis Etienne, but we're not going to talk about
Mhm.
how Ramondre is super involved in the passing attack. I believe
Yes.
this is his 3rd straight week with 6+ targets, averaging 4.5 yards a carry. Like Ramondre's the guy there, despite Damian Harris still seeing 12 rushing attempts on the day. Like Ramondre's a guy and is still top 10. So who'd rather have rest of the season?
So Ramondre also 17 plus points in 5 out of his last 6 games.
Yes.
And I think I'm going to lean Ramondre. And yes, Damian Harris does worry me a little bit when we go in this trade. That would probably be the reason I go get ETN, and that would be a reason you could make this trade.
Yeah.
But the Pats are going to commit to the run every single game, no matter what.
Yeah.
They're going to be down by 14. They're still going to run the ball. And I think Ramondre is going to be a big benefactor of that. And if Mac Jones is kind of struggling with confidence right now, that check down is going to be deadly for fantasy for Ramondre. And he is just going to see target after target after target. And Damian Harris is not going to steal any of that. So I think I go Ramondre. I do think ETN's got a slightly higher ceiling though, but I like Ramondre the rest of the season.
I 100% agree. I think I am going to lean ETN because I want the higher ceiling.
Yep.
But I like that. That's why I'm like, I feel like this is a legit question. Like, I don't feel like I'm crazy for asking this because ETN just bursting onto the scene. But Ramondre, like I said it before the season, like he has sneaky league winning potential. Yep. He might go out and win you a league this year if you drafted him in your draft as your running back 4. Antonio Gibson. I think it's too soon to take a victory lap on Antonio Gibson because we were saying before the year that even with Brian Robinson, you should still be investing in Gibson because this is exactly why. 20 fantasy points, running back 10 on the week. abysmal on the ground. I don't know why they kept feeding him the football. 7 rushing
Yeah.
attempts for 19 yards, but 7 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. Like, this is what you still roster Antonio Gibson for. This is why he's still like my running back 3 on a few of my teams, because I know he can do this on a week's notice. I still prefer. I don't even know if I prefer Brian Robinson going forward.
I
He
don't
gets no
think I
receiving
do.
work. He's too dependent on the touchdown every week.
Yep. And he's not been efficient at all.
No, he has not. He has not. Let's move on to some wide receiver booms of the week. AJ Brown, he's pretty good at football. 6 receptions for 156 yards on 11 targets, 3 scores in the first half. This game was well out of reach early. They did not need to rely on the passing attack any more than AJ Brown. Yeah, he's really good at football. Anything you want to add to that? Because that's all I have.
So the thing I've really come to like about AJ Brown is when it's a Devonta Smith week, Brown is still solid. It's still 14 points from AJ Brown. When it's an AJ Brown week, it is strictly AJ Brown. All the targets, all the touchdowns go to him. And so that's what you got to love, is because Jalen Hurts does look one guy's way over another during the game, but he's still always going to be looking at least a little bit at AJ Brown.
I mean, that touchdown and double coverage for AJ Brown, I love the celebration. Yeah. He gave like 1, 2, both of you. That was, I laughed hard at that. That was great. AJ Brown, he's special. He is special. If you have him on your fantasy team this year, he has paid off. He has proven us wrong. Jalen Hurts has really stepped up to the plate this year. DeAndre Hopkins, hey, he's also good at football too. I mean, granted, against the Minnesota Vikings secondary, nasty touchdown catch. That was absolutely absurd. Kyler Murray should have never thrown that football.
No.
But when you got Nuke in the back of the end zone, all it takes is an absolute claw to just reach up. He's like DeAndre Hopkins. I feel like he's sneaky like the Kawhi Leonard of the NFL. Is he not?
Yes. Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel about him.
It just looks, it looks unnaturally easy whenever it's something like that. Like there's just no effort.
No, none at all. 12 receptions on 13 targets for 159 yards and a touchdown, 33 fantasy points on the week. Yeah, he's back. And until Marquise Brown is back on the field, DeAndre Hopkins should be an absolute lock for your lineup. Set it, forget it. Like, the 6-week wait was worth it. It was 100% worth it.
And even with Brown back, I think they're still both going to be super solid. They both run in different parts of the field too. So I think this offense could actually be pretty good when Brown's back.
Yeah. And once Kyler is finally, I mean, Kyler's still, what do you throw? 2 interceptions on Sunday? 3 interceptions? I think he threw 2.
2 picks, yeah.
Yeah, 2 picks. So once the Call of Duty beta, or once the Modern Warfare 2 has been out for a while, he'll be off that. Because that did come out this week, so the Cardinals have not won. That curse still continues. I love that so much. It's not even like Kyler played terribly. Like 2 picks isn't great. It's not like Kyler was awful on Sunday.
No. 326 and 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Like, he was still good on Sunday. But at any rate, hey, another guy who's really good at football. Like, this was like a return to normalcy week for fantasy football. We finally got the high-scoring affairs. We finally got the studs back where they belong. Tyreek Hill, 12 receptions on 14 targets for 188 yards, no touchdowns, 31.5 fantasy points. I mean, the Miami Dolphins just continue to prove me wrong. Prove us wrong, all of us wrong. We thought this offense was going to be a run heavy. We thought Mike McDaniel, as much as he loved to get the ball into his playmakers' hands, you couldn't produce top 5 production for both Hill and Waddle. Now here we are, both our top 5 wide receivers on the week. I'll chalk my L's up where they belong. Yeah. I never said Tyreek Hill was going to suck this year. I just expected not this every single week. But here he is, number 1 wide receiver on the season.
Yeah, him and Waddle both, because like you alluded to, Waddle's wide receiver 4, 8 catches, 9 targets, 106 yards, and 2 tutties for 30.6 points. They exploit good matchups.
Yes.
The Lions, they exploited. Baltimore's got bad defense, they exploited. They didn't exploit Minnesota because Tua was out. But when it's a good matchup, they go off. So whenever you get something like that, you should be just so excited, because they both do. 9 targets and 14 targets. Tua looks both of their ways, and McDaniel knows how to get them open.
Right. Yeah, and that's all Mike McDaniel wants to do is get the ball into his playmakers' hands. That's it.
Yes.
Let him do the work afterwards. And it's a thing of beauty. DJ Moore, the wide receiver 5 on the week. Way to go, DJ Moore. 6 receptions on 11 targets, 152 yards and a tutty. single-handedly saved me from getting absolutely destroyed in one of my leagues this week. DJ Moore, a very big reason why I'm still in my matchup. But about DJ Moore specifically, I mean, he's a target hog on this team now. No CMC, no Robbie Anderson. I mean, he granted great matchup with Atlanta, but like he's it. He's the guy there. That he's the one that can make plays. He's the one who's going to see all the targets. Like I think we're going to see 10 plus targets in every game the rest of the season for DJ Moore.
So I'm convinced that Carolina tried their best through the first 6-7 weeks to showcase Robbie Anderson and CMC to get the most trade value, and they are just going to hyper target DJ Moore the rest of the season to try and keep him happy. He's going to
that's what you have to do, though. Let's be honest.
Targets, and then DJ Moore is going to want to stay because he's getting all this publicity because you know that people are seeing how good a wide receiver he is on a crappy team.
Tankathon between the Panthers and the Bears.
Yep.
That's what this is.
It is.
That's what this is. Rondale Moore, nice little player. 7 receptions on 8 targets for 92 yards, touchdown. Added 2 rushing attempts for 12 yards as well. I mean, this is what you can get from Rondale Moore. He's a boom player, but I mean, I don't think you can expect this going forward. I think we can move on. I don't want to sit and talk about Rondale Moore. Cooper Kupp, pretty good at football. 8 receptions on 12 targets, 79 yards and a touchdown. 23 fantasy points. Again, got to monitor his status going forward. Stephon Diggs. I mean, I just love seeing all these studs up here. 6 receptions, 8 targets, 108 yards, touchdown, 23 fantasy points. Jacoby Myers, volume hog, baby. 9 receptions on 12 targets, 60 yards and a touchdown. Jacoby, has he caught 3 touchdowns this year?
I think so.
He's already caught more than his career total. Way to go, Jacoby. You're my hero. You're my hero, Jacoby. And then Brandon Ayuk, no Debo, 6 receptions on 6 targets, 81 yards and a touchdown from CMC himself. Top 10 wide receivers, all over 20 fantasy points this week. Gotta love to see it. Gotta love to see it.
And running backs over 20.
Yeah, and running backs. What's the line at for quarterbacks? Oh, almost 20. Josh Allen, you chump.
The Packers weren't so bad. He would have been over 20.
That is very true. Let's move on to quarterback boom since we're talking about Josh Allen. We'll get to him at the end. But Tua Tagovailoa, we were talking about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. 29 completions on 36 attempts. 3 touchdowns. 29.2 fantasy points. Tua. Is he more than, he feels like he's more than a streaming option at this point.
He's got to be.
I don't know if I want to roster him.
Well, actually, so you know what? I say that, and I said that last time. He's only got 2 games over 20 fantasy points.
Does he really?
Yes. Week 2 against Baltimore, he had 40.9, and then this week he had 29.2. Other than that, he hasn't thrown more than 1 touchdown. He had 14 against New England, 11 against Buffalo, and 15.9 against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, let him be a streamer from here on out. Let him exploit good matchups.
You got to start him next week. He's playing Chicago.
Oh, yeah. You got to, yeah. Tua startable next week. He'll probably be my start of the week next week.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, so Tua, you got to tamper expectations there. But, I mean, when this team has a great matchup, Tua should be your number 1 streaming option pretty much every week.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, no surprise he's at the top here. 19 completions, on 28 attempts, 285 yards, 4 passing touchdowns on the day. Hardly ran the football, though. Only 2 attempts for 10 yards, but when you get up to that big of a jump on the Steelers, you may as well just hand the ball off and not let Jalen run the football around the field. Probably hands down best quarterback value in drafts this year. I don't think we need to say anything more than that.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a top 3 quarterback at the end of the year easily. I mean, it's him, probably top 4 easily. It's him, Lamar, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes right now, and those guys are in a tier of their own.
Right. Yeah. Nobody else is touching them right now. We could see a resurgence from this next guy, Kyler Murray. 31 completions on 44 attempts, 326 yards. Good for 3 touchdowns. It did throw 2 picks. But we did see him scramble a little bit for 26.6 fantasy points on the day. Like these are the games you drafted Kyler Murray for. Because he was really disappointing to start the year. You weren't getting that that high level of production, he was still the quarterback 6 coming into this week, I believe, which I just kind of laughed at. People were like ready
Yeah.
to panic on him. Like he's a top 10 quarterback. Why are we panicking on Kyler Murray? Like that's where you drafted him too. You didn't draft Kyler Murray as a top 3 quarterback. You drafted Kyler as a top 5 quarterback, and he's only one spot behind that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what you drafted Kyler for, though. Good matchup against Minnesota. They cannot control mobile quarterbacks to save their lives. But this is what you drafted Kyler for. I think this has to instill some confidence in you moving forward this year.
Yeah, definitely. Kyler, or I just think D-Hop makes such a huge difference in this game, and that's why I like when people talk about like Marquise Brown versus D-Hop, and from an NFL standpoint, it's not close because Marquise Brown plays really good, but defenses have to change the entire way they do play defense to counteract DeAndre Hopkins, and Hopkins still puts up these kind of numbers. And so this offense is just way better with Hopkins in.
1,000% agree. Welcome back, Dak. QB4 on the week, 21 of 27 for 250 and 2 tutties. Added a rushing touchdown as well for 26.4 fantasy points. Matchup, Chicago Bears. Take note. Take note.
And it's only getting easier.
It's only getting easier. Dak chose the perfect time to come back.
Yep.
Lions and Bears back-to-back weeks. Get back into the ease of things. Yeah, he's ready to go. He's ready to go. He can be inserted back into your lineups confidently. Justin Fields, we need to have a conversation about Justin Fields. I believe we do. Man is not a good NFL quarterback. Let's just set the record straight there.
No.
17 attempts or 17 completions on 23 attempts for 151, 2 touchdowns, but 8 rushing attempts for 60 yards and a touchdown. Good for 26 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
Is he this year's Jalen Hurts? Notice how quietly I said that. I'm saying this because this is going to get people really mad. But I'm getting Jalen Hurts vibes. I really am.
It's interesting because they're starting to use him on the ground. He has a built-in. These last 3 weeks he's had 8.8, 14.2, and 12 points extra off of just rushing.
Right.
They're starting to use him. I mean, he's at least a streamer, but boy, he's not a good NFL quarterback.
No,
like at least Hurts, you saw, man, if he just fixes the accuracy, he's a good NFL quarterback. You watch Fields, and it's like if he can fix his decision making and his accuracy and his deep ball, and it's just like
if he could fix every part about his game other than his mobility.
Yeah, and so he does have Miami, Detroit, Atlanta's next 3 games. Championship. So if you're looking at the playoffs too, he goes Philly and Buffalo. Don't like those. But championship game, he's got Detroit again. So if he would be a guy that he goes on bye week 14, you just pick him up before week 15 if you're in that like I'm streaming guys constantly, and you just have him week 17. As a break the glass just in case kind of option. But he's got to be in that conversation.
He's been a top 3 quarterback the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
A top 3 fantasy football quarterback the past. We got to start paying attention to Justin Fields, people. We got to start paying attention to him.
Here you go.
I'm sorry. I didn't think he would be this good.
No.
For fantasy. He's not that good in the NFL, but for fantasy, I didn't think he'd be this usable.
No.
He might be your top streaming option the next couple of weeks here.
Here's your real question. Tua or Fields?
Oh, don't ask me silly questions like that because I don't know answers to them. I cannot watch Justin Fields. I'm gonna say Tua, but it's gonna be Justin Fields next week. It's gonna be Justin Fields.
It's gonna be gross. It's gonna be so gross. But yeah, just the rushing upside alone, I think Tua's got a higher ceiling.
Yeah,
because he can have 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. But Fields is just safer right now. Fields has a floor of 8 points, every single week.
100%.
Man, I don't know how much longer he's a quarterback in Chicago after this year. I think he was the sacrifice.
Yeah, he's the sacrificial lamb for Bryce Young coming up, or CJ Stroud. Mm-hmm. Another Ohio State quarterback who, guess what? I don't think is going to be that good in the NFL. That's my theory. Ohio State quarterbacks do not translate to the NFL. At any rate, we need to keep moving here. Marcus Mariota, he threw the ball more than 14 times this week. 28 passing attempts, 20 completions for 253 and 3 tutties. Added 43 rushing yards on the ground as well. I hate to say it, but you can't depend on this from Marcus Mariota because this is what, his third game this year that he's thrown more than 15 times.
Yeah, you just can't. He's matchup dependent, and even then, it's a shot in the dark.
100%. He's the perfect super flex quarterback of, I don't care who's in my super flex as long as it's a quarterback.
Yes.
And Marcus Mariota does me wonders. Kirk Cousins, my start of the week. 24 of 36. 232, 2 touchdowns, added a rushing touchdown as well. Kirk turned on the Jets.
Yeah, he did.
Exactly as I said it was this week. Kirk is playing at home at noon in a favorable matchup. 20 plus from Kirk.
Start him up.
Start him up. That's exactly what happened. Taylor Heineke. I can't. This is disgusting. How is he a top 10 quarterback this week?
No idea.
23 to 31 for 279 and a touchdown, added a touchdown on the ground as well for 23 fantasy points. He's unstartable. Let's move on to Lamar Jackson, who is really good. He's in your lineup every week. 27 to 38, 238, 2 touchdowns through the air, 9 attempts for 43 yards, 21.8 fantasy points. He's still good at football, and this guy, he gave you a little bit of a scare, but when you're kind of pummeling the Packers, you only need to throw the ball 25 times, and you barely need to have a completion percentage of 50.
Yeah.
And you're still a top 10 quarterback on the week because you throw 2 touchdowns and run for 49 yards. Like, this is an abysmal stat line for Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And he's still a top 10 quarterback. That should just show you how good he is.
When he needs to be good, he's really good.
When he needs to be, right? If he's playing the Packers, he doesn't need to be. Let's move on. Let's wrap it out with tight end booms of the week. Number 1, Tyler Conklin. Holy crap. I didn't realize he had 10 targets. 6 receptions for 79 yards and 2 tutties. So this is interesting. Is this a sign of thing to come for Conklin? Because there's no Breece Hall. So no longer anybody in the short game to dominate those targets. Tyler Conklin is ideally the next guy up here. So we're going to see more of Breece's targets funnel to Conklin. Is this a product of both Breece and Corey Davis being out? Why did we see this resurgence of Tyler Conklin this week?
Yeah. So, they pretty much moved off of Elijah Moore. If he doesn't get traded tomorrow, I'm going to be shocked.
Right.
I don't know if you heard what Solace, they asked him about it, and he goes, "We just wanted to see Garrett Wilson more this game." That was his answer to why Elijah Moore didn't get targets.
You see Garrett Wilson plenty this year, Coach. What are you talking about?
Exactly. So I got to think that he's going to start seeing some more targets coming back because when their running game was rough in the beginning of the year, he saw targets. Now it's going to be rough again. I think he's going to see targets. I'm not saying he's going to be great, but he's for sure a streaming option rest of the season at least.
Yeah, if you need a tight end stash at any point, I think Conklin's your guy, along with a few other names. Well, at least one other name on this list we're going to bring up. But yeah, Conk, I think this is a sign of things to potentially come. Not 25 fantasy points, but I think he'll be a consistent double digits.
Yep.
From here on out without Breece. Isaiah Likely filled in for Mark Andrews, rookie tight end in Baltimore. 6 receptions on 7 targets for 77 yards and a touchdown. Good for 19.7 fantasy points. Not even worth a waiver ad in my mind.
No.
If Mark Andrews is out, though, then I'm willing to stream Isaiah Likely. But even at the start of the year, the talk was there would be room for both of these players in this offense.
No.
Which Mark Andrews has just dominated. But Isaiah Likely, he's a nice little player. Yep. He's a nice little player. I picked him up in Dynasty. I'm just stashing him if something does happen to Mark Andrews or they move on from Mark, whatever. If something crazy happens, I want Isaiah Likely on my team in Baltimore. Because that team runs through the tight end position. Kyle Pitts.
Woo!
Way to go, buddy. 5 receptions on 9 targets for 80 yards and a touchdown. Way to go. There it is. I just had to absolutely demolish you in order for you to actually do something on the football field. I think I said it on our Stardom Saturday episode. No, Stardom Saturday was it last week? any point. I remember talking about Kyle Pitts, and I said this will be the week. Now that we've just absolutely buried Kyle Pitts, it's going to be the week he scores.
Mm-hmm.
And so it be. And now he's going to go back to being irrelevant next week, I fear. But Kyle Pitts, way to go, man.
Yep.
Way to score in America. Thank you, Marcus Mariota, for actually throwing the football this week.
Yeah. Arthur
That's
Smith.
a big part of it. 9 targets. That's the most he's seen on the season.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you give Kyle Pitts the football. Maybe Arthur Smith could learn a thing or two from this game, but I'm guessing once they get Cordero back and Damian Williams back, that will not be the case.
No.
Evan Ingram, tight end 4 on the week, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 55 yards and a touchdown. He's like sneaky double-digit fantasy points the last 4 weeks, I believe.
Yeah, he's another streaming option for sure.
Yeah, 100% agree. He's a sneaky good streaming option. Zach Ertz, 4 receptions on 5 targets, 34 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz is like probably the least enticing stud tight end there is to ever exist, because he rarely goes over 45 receiving yards, but he scores a touchdown and he just gets a ton of volume.
Yep.
And even this week, 5 targets, not even a ton of volume, but still a top 5 tight end on the week. Yeah. Yep. Dalton Schultz, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 74 yards, good for 13.4 fantasy points. He's just better with Dak on the field. When Dak's not on the field, Dalton Schultz is barely playable. But now that Dak's back, if you went out and bought Dalton Schultz low, you are doing a victory lap right now for yourself.
Sitting pretty, yep.
Schultz is better with Dak. George Kittle, 3 receptions on only 5 targets for 39 yards, but he did catch a touchdown. That salvaged his day. Mike Gesicki, also salvaged by a touchdown. Very similar line. 3 receptions on 4 targets for 38 yards. This is the guy I'm looking to stash moving forward. We'll talk about him later in the episode too, but Greg Dulcich, 4 receptions, 5 targets, 87 yards.
Yeah.
This guy has to be on your radar moving forward. If you are desperate at tight end, I know Greg Dulcich is on bye next week. I'm going to save this for the end of the episode, though. Greg Dulcich has to be on your radar. More on him to close out the episode. Then Dallas Goedert, 6 receptions, 6 targets, 64 yards. That's an easy stat line. 12.4 fantasy points. Yeah, he's good at football.
Yep.
That wraps out our boom players of the week with the last 15 or so minutes here. We got to get through busts of the week and some rapid fire waiver wire. We'll start at the running back position for the week. Did I say week 1, week 8 bus? I think I said week 1 because that's within the doc. I'm just reading the doc. Week 8 bus.
Hasn't been updated for a while.
All right. We don't update the titles. We update the players because David Montgomery only scored 8.5 fantasy points at running back 33 on the week. Averaged only 2 yards per carry, 3 receptions for 22 yards and a fumble. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys are a really good defense. So I had very low hopes for David Montgomery this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frankly, he's matchup dependent going forward with Khalil Herbert getting some play too.
Yeah, and he's been super inefficient. He's averaging under 4 yards per carry. And he's only got 13 receptions on 14 targets. This isn't the same David Montgomery saw at the end of the last 2 seasons.
No.
So yeah, he's borderline top 24. Like we talked about Ramondre and Travis Etienne, I'd easily take both of them over David Montgomery this year.
No question.
That's not even a question. So
that's not even a question. Yeah,
he's definitely fallen down quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Jacobs, after 3 straight games of 30+ fantasy points and 140 rushing yards, he had 100 less rushing yards yesterday, excuse me. 43 yards on 10 attempts, 2 receptions for 11 yards. This Raiders offense stinks, man.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe how I don't even want to go on a rant because they're not worse than the Broncos offense, are they?
I think they are. They just.
How can you not get Devontae Adams involved? That's the thing that baffles me.
I don't understand either.
It's not like the Saints have been torched on the ground this year. It's not like this. The Saints run defense isn't the same as last year. You can run on this team, and Josh Jacobs still averaging 4.3 yards per carry. That's not bad. But when you're getting shut out 24-0, Josh Jacobs isn't going to touch the football.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was one of the worst performances I've seen from an offense this entire season.
Oh, yes. Hands down. Absolutely. But Devontae Adams has to be the greatest mystery of fantasy football this year because some weeks he'll give you 24+.
Yeah.
He's more like Mike Williams than he is a Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson or Stephon Diggs this year.
Yeah, he has been.
That's kind of crazy. Jonathan Taylor threw up a dud this week, 16 attempts, for 76 yards. Only one target. Had a fumble as well. Look, 5.6 fantasy points. Better days are ahead for Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be. This is frustrating though. With Sam Ehlinger at quarterback, I don't know how much better things can get. Unfortunately, not much.
Yeah, It's tough just looking at Jonathan Taylor because it's just like what has gone wrong, and it feels like everything's kind of crumbled around him.
Right.
Offensive line got worse, quarterback play somehow got worse. So man, but moving forward, I feel like you still got to stick with him. We know how good he is. Like
Right.
his talent hasn't gone away. If he can come back healthy, then he's fine. So now is the time to buy low. You just got to do it. And like you can't give up running back one overall package for Jonathan Taylor anymore.
No. You absolutely can. Like his value is deflated right now.
Yeah.
Now would be the time to go out and get him on the cheap if you can. But unfortunately, whoever has him in your league probably isn't going to move off of him because it's Jonathan freaking Taylor. It's not like they're going to give him for chump change.
Yeah.
Let's a few honorable mentions here. We got Darrell Henderson. Yikes. Wasn't even the leader in carries on his own team this week.
Nope.
5 fantasy points of running back 48 on the week. And Brian Robinson. Only 2 fantasy points, running back 58 on the week. He just doesn't get the receiving work. And if he doesn't find the end zone, it's tough to bank on him most weeks.
Yep.
Let's move on to wide receiver busts of the week. Hey, we just brought up Devontae Adams. 1.2 fantasy points. The wide receiver 90, not 19, 90. 9-0.
Ridiculous. 5 targets, 1 catch.
Raiders, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we giving up Chris Olave? That's not even who the pick was. Why are we giving up a first and a second for arguably the best wide receiver in football?
Yeah.
To give him 1 reception. What? What are we doing? Someone explain it to me, because Marshawn Lattimore has typically been torched by Devontae Adams, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Lattimore struggles with good route runners. And you want to know what Devontae Adams is? A good route runner. So, like, what's going on? What's going on in Vegas?
I don't know.
It's a rhetorical question. I don't expect you to know because I have no freaking clue either.
Yeah.
Like, I get it when Josh Jacobs is hot, but when you're down 24-0 and you need to throw the football, how is Devontae Adams only going to get 1 reception? That's embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing.
They did give Matt Collins 8 targets, so there's that.
Derek Carr is a top 12 quarterback. No. Kirk, far superior at this point. Devonta Smith, wide receiver 51 on the week, 7.3 fantasy points. This is what's crazy. Still had 8 targets, 5 receptions, but only 23 yards. Like, this should have been like an 80-plus yard game for Devonta Smith, and it just wasn't. Just kept it very close to the line of scrimmage. And when A.J. Brown goes off, A.J. Brown goes off. There's nothing you can really do about that. But this volume is still encouraging. It's just the yardage that didn't fall his way.
Yep.
Drake London, the wide receiver, 52 with 7.1 fantasy points. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 31 yards. Kyle Pitts was the main beneficiary this week. But, I mean, when Marcus Mariota doesn't throw the football and with how bad this Falcons offense really is in unfavorable matchups, like Drake London is borderline unusable now. Got off to a hot start. But, man, Arthur Smith still just wants to run the football, and I don't think he's going to go away from that just because they won this week.
Yeah. I would
Christian Kirk, 7 fantasy points, a wide receiver, 53. He did leave the London game against the Broncos with an injury. Wan'Dale Robinson, 3.5, wide receiver, 63 on the week, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 15 yards. I kind of figured this was coming for Wan'Dale.
Yeah.
Like, it was just one of those where the hype started getting too out of control.
Yeah.
And he
That
came
was
crashing back down to earth.
That was the reason I added him. It wasn't like we
Yeah.
had crazy expectations for him, but people were like, "Oh, they traded Tony because they believe in Wandale," and then he comes out and puts that up. So
100%. Yeah. This guy really deserves to be on the duds. Cortland Sutton, 2.3 fantasy points, a wide receiver 70, only 4 targets, 1 reception on those for 13 yards. I mean, this is just sad. This is just sad.
Yeah.
Jerry Jeudy was the main guy, but he still only had 63 yards. I mean, the Broncos are just. Greg Dulcich was the leader in receiving yards, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think KJ Hamler was second.
I don't understand the Broncos this year. It's disgusting.
It is.
Honorable mentions: Gabe Davis, 5.5 fantasy points. Had to match up with the Packers, but man, really just didn't need him. Rashad Bateman left the game with an injury. Obviously, threw up a goose egg on the week. Brandon Cooks, wide receiver 33. It wasn't too bad on the week. Yeah, it wasn't too bad on the week. But still, nonetheless, you'd expect more in a matchup with a poor Tennessee secondary when you're getting absolutely pounded on the ground by Derrick Henry.
Yeah, it's just kind of the way his season's been. Like 11s feels like almost a ceiling right now because he just doesn't score touchdowns this year.
It truly does. Robert Woods, only 2.6 fantasy points, a wide receiver 72, and Michael Pittman wasn't terrible with Sam Ehlinger, 12.3 fantasy points, the wide receiver 30 on the week. But again, he's kind of like a Brandon Cooks right now, where it feels like Michael Pittman. You're not going to get much higher than that with him at quarterback.
Yeah, he's a guy that it's just he doesn't stretch the field enough right now. Like him and Cooks don't, where they're just going to manufacture fantasy points.
Right.
And so it's tough.
It's tough. Quarterback bust of the week, not top 12, Derek Carr, 2.9 fantasy points, a quarterback 27 on the week. 15 to 26 for 101 yards. That's disgusting. He couldn't even average 10 yards of completion.
No.
This man is top 10 to you all? Top 12 to you all?
Oh,
pick on the week as well. Russell Wilson, 11.7, the quarterback 20. 18 to 30 for 252, a touchdown and an interception. Here's the thing with Russ. Like, you watch the Broncos, and it's not. I mean, it's pretty bad. I almost said, like, it doesn't. You look at the box score, and it doesn't seem atrocious. But you watch the games, and you realize just how bad 18 to 30 for 252 is.
Yes.
You realize just how bad that is. Honorable mentions here: Aaron Rodgers, 16.2. Granted, tough matchup with the Bills. But he's droppable at this point, is he not?
He's got to be. I mean, he's had 2 games over 17 points. He's quarterback. He hasn't had a game inside. He's had 1 game where he's a quarterback 12. That was his highest finish on a week. He's not even starting caliber on a random week. And now Lazard's battling injuries. Christian Watson's battling injuries. And he's checked out. He said, if we fall to 3-5, I'm open to a trade. Like, he doesn't want to be there anymore. He's already said that if it keeps up, he's going to retire at the end of the year. Yeah, I got no faith in Aaron Rodgers moving forward.
No, I think he's droppable in your league, and I would not hesitate to do so. Daniel Jones, he had a few nice games in a row there, strung a few together, but quarterback 23 on the week, quarterback 23 on the week with 9 fantasy points. You probably weren't starting him anyways, but there was chatter of him being a decent streaming option this week, and he did not deliver against the Seahawks. Tight end bust of the week, Mark Andrews, the tight end 23 with 6.3 fantasy points. He did leave this game, but he saw 5 targets for 33 yards on 3 receptions. Not a bad day. Honorable mentions here as well. We got Irv Smith. No, you're good. We didn't up, but Irv Smith still wasn't great on the week. I thought Irv Smith was my start of the week. Only had 6.8 fantasy points, but did leave this game due to injury. Is there anybody else disappointing from tight end? There it is, Taysom Hill. I'm like, Kyle Pitts. We just talked about him being a stud. Taysom Hill.
Put in the stat line, not the name.
No, you're good. Taysom Hill, 8.3 fantasy points. The tight end 18 on the week. Had 1 reception for 11 yards. Did see 61 yards rushing, but again, a lot of people I've seen have been asking Taysom Hill or blank. I will take the blank more times than not because Taysom Hill, I think, is, I don't want to say touchdown dependent, but
rushing touchdown dependent.
Right. If you're offering me like a deep deep tight end player, Taysom Hill. Well, I will say,
Yeah.
give me the guy who's going to get the goal line packages, right? Like, of course,
Yes.
I'll say that, but like, there's like Taysom Hill or like, I did see a lot of Taysom Hill or Irv this week. I guess Taysom Hill did deliver more than Irv, but
Yeah.
freaking Johnny Munt,
Yeah.
straight out of Sims 4.
Yeah, but if we're talking Taysom or Greg Dulcich, Taysom, Tyler Conklin, I'm going to take Dulcich and Conklin.
100%. I 100% agree with that. That wraps out our boom and bust players of the week. We got a few minutes left here, Cameron. Let's dive into our semi-new segment. We're 2 weeks into it, the rapid fire waiver wire. When you hear this podcast, the waiver wire will run tonight in your league. We want to make sure you're prioritizing the right players. So let's rapid fire list our top waiver ads of the week here with the last few minutes we have to close out the episode, and I will let you start.
So my first guy is Rondale Moore. Obviously, like we said, he can have some boom weeks. When Marquise Brown comes back, it's not going to be as great. But as the second option in this offense, we could, and just targets that we've seen, I think we could see some double-digit weeks moving forward. He's rostered in 51% of leagues, but he's definitely a guy that I think should be added in all leagues right now.
Yeah, most definitely, and that's the thing with these waiver wire ads. Typically, we lean 50% rostership or less. Rondale Moore is going to be the exception this week because it is kind of an ugly week on waivers. And
Yes.
frankly, if he's available in 51% is hardly that far off.
Yep.
We're going to bend just a little bit this week because, yeah, I think Rondale Moore is absolutely worth an ad. If he's not rostered in your league already, he probably should be.
Yep.
My top waiver ad of the week, Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers, rostered in only 35% of leagues. We've already done this experiment of, we've already tried him as the wide receiver 2 in this Chargers offense. But you haven't tried him as the number 1 perimeter wide receiver in this offense. Keenan Allen's coming back. He's going to be playing pretty much exclusively in the slot. Now we get Josh Palmer as the number 1 out wide receiver as well. And now I get that may mean better cornerback matchups. I just want pieces of dynamic offenses. That's what I want. Josh Palmer is capable of giving you a big week. And if Justin Herbert gets Keenan Allen back in the slot for some easy completions, that can open up things on the outside and get Justin Herbert into this groove that he's been missing all year. So Josh Palmer, he's probably still available in your league. I'd go swoop him up as they're coming off the bye.
Yep. My next guy is Darius Slayton. He saw 6 targets, and like we talked about with Wan'Dale, a lot of people were expecting Wan'Dale to kind of take off. But Darius Slayton might be the wide receiver 1 in this offense now. Kenny Galladay's certainly not it. Richie James, I don't think is it.
No.
I mean, Saquon's the number 1 receiving option, but someone's got to fill that role. Someone's got to catch passes, and so I don't see why it couldn't be Darius Slay filling 75% of the wide receiver run role in another offense being playable week to week.
Out targeted, out received Wan'Dale Robinson this week. I'm going to give myself a nice little pat on the back here. When I made my waiver wire stashes video for Fantasy Pros last week, I said, let your league mates be enamored with Wan'Dale Robinson because Darius Slayton is still going to be a part of this offense. And here he is. Ended up being a fine play this week. Next waiver wire ad I want to talk about. I'm kind of split. So whichever one I don't take right now, I'm going to decide right in the moment. I'm going to let you take. I'm going to go Latavius Murray here. I was between Latavius or Ronnie Rivers. And I think you could probably guess why I am prioritizing Latavius over Ronnie Rivers, even though Latavius is on a bye. Look, since Latavius has got to town, he's seen double-digit carries in 2 out of 3 games. Saw 9 in the other game. He's clearly getting plenty of the running work in this Denver backfield. And just with how poor and injury prone the running back position is, I'll take a guy who's going to get double-digit touches as a depth piece on my roster. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Latavius Murray is startable. But if you're looking for depth and you're looking for a guy who could just fall into the end zone on a given week, I think Latavius Murray could be that guy. I would be okay with picking him up right now before he comes off of his bye. At the very least, he should be on your radar next week for waivers if you don't pick him up this week.
Yeah, so then Ronnie Rivers is another one. Obviously, Kyron Williams is going to come back at some point this week off IR. We've heard some hype about him. But Rivers came in this week seemingly out of nowhere and just took over the backfield. He had 8 carries. He had another 4 receptions on 4 targets. we're not expecting anything huge from Ronnie Rivers, but he could be the starter for the foreseeable future. Sean McVay kind of rides the hot hand, and Darrell Henderson just hasn't been doing it. Cam Akers wants out of town, and Kyron Williams, if he does come back, he hasn't played in forever. So why not just go? That's kind of our thought process with Ronnie Rivers. Why not just go get a piece of this Los Angeles backfield? Maybe it works out. And if it doesn't, you know what? It's a waiver ad. You just drop him in 2 weeks. So,
and that's it with waivers. People, I think a lot of the time are ready for us to give like the next big thing off the waivers. Guess how many next big things you find on waivers? Not very many. You're not going to find an Amon-Ra or Rashad Penny every single week.
Yep.
This, unfortunately, is probably going to be one of those weeks. Other thing with Ronnie Rivers, like the Rams have been in trade talks about getting a running back in return, getting a Cam Akers, or not Cam Akers, a Kareem Hunt, excuse me. They were in the Christian McCaffrey hunt as well. Like they are also shopping for running back. So I don't think it's just Kyron Williams. I think it is just like they could bring in a running back before the traded deadline. But if they don't, by tomorrow night, I think Ronnie Rivers is definitely worth an ad. And lastly, Greg Dulcich. I mean, frankly, I probably should have talked about Greg Dulcich before I talked about Latavius Murray. But man, Greg Dulcich, he is just too good. 3 weeks in a row now, double-digit fantasy points. Like he is going to be involved in this Denver Broncos offense. Russ has been targeting the tight end position at just a dumb rate this year. But Greg Dulcich, clearly talented. They had no hesitation to get him involved right away. No hesitation whatsoever. So again, maybe you're like, well, he's on a bye. I don't want to stash him. At the very least, he needs to be on your radar for next week, and he's probably going to make this list next week as well if nobody picks him up this week.
Yeah. 3 top 12 finishes in a row. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know.
That's
Greg
huge.
Dulcich is the next big thing. I firmly believe that.
Yes.
Anything you want to add as we wrap out the episode here, Cameron?
I don't think so. I think it's just continue to look for stars. I mean, people are so low on Dalvin Cook for some reason because he hasn't put up a 40-point week. Go trade for Dalvin Cook. Trade for Jonathan. The stars who've proven it over and over again are still good. So I just go grab studs right now.
Yeah, I've seen an uncomfortable amount or maybe an alarming amount of sell high on Dalvin Cook takes recently, and I haven't quite understood it.
Yeah.
If he's good and he's going to put up games like this, like why are we questioning this?
Yep.
Why I don't quite understand that. Let me look at his upcoming games because I know he does have a tough stretch coming up here. Not Brandon Cooks. I want Dalvin Cook. We'll close out the episode with this. I mean, he gets Washington next week. He does get Buffalo, then Dallas, then New England. But weeks 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Oh, my goodness. Dallas, 13, he gets the Jets, Lions, Colts, Giants, Packers, Bears. That's what he closes out the season with. So you're going to go sell high on Dalvin Cook because of a poor 3-week stretch? I'm sorry. That's you. That's infuriating. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Lucas Wenzel, CamLaw317 for Cameron. The Fellas pages, FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on TikTok and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, turning on notifications. We're releasing new content every single day. Make sure you subscribe to the pod as well, so you're notified when all of our new episodes come out, and join our fantasy football community of league winners over on Chalkboard down in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. We missed Tyler this week. I feel like I didn't really touch on Ty being gone. Technical issues on his end tonight. He took one for the team and said, you guys record without me. I'm going to get it together and figure it out for you all. So we missed you, Ty. I would have loved to have you on tonight, but that is why he was not here. We're just two stooges being dudes, unfortunately. I guess we can say 3. Ty was here for about half an hour beforehand trying to figure it out. Fantasy Football Fellas, we will see you all midweek for a preview of Week 9. Enjoy Monday Night Football. Hope you enjoyed Monday Night Football by the time you listen to this. Best of luck on waivers, and we will see you later this week. Deuces.